Hello transport nerds and fellow planners, and welcome back to Talking Planning. In my The Year That Was video, I said I wanted to kickstart a little more actually talking planning again for this year, and in the spirit of New Year's resolutions, I wanted to give it a red hot go, even if it does fall flat on its face, so I thought it was time to relaunch a series that I once called State of the Plan. At the time, I developed some extremely cheesy graphics, which I laugh at again, and they were based on the omnipresent State of the Union addresses that were front and centre on telly at the time. So, roll the clip. As you may know, I spent the Christmas break up in Brisbane, and it was great to catch up with some friends and family after what had been a fairly full-on year. Having about 3 weeks off helped as a bit of a reset, and the time off was really well needed. As long with enjoying a healthy or unhealthy, depending on who you ask, dose of Southeast Queensland public transport travel, I really enjoyed the opportunity to see what was happening back in the big city, enjoy some great company, tasty food, and a few rather excellent bevies. And on that note, tons has changed in Southeast Queensland since I was last there, especially in the rail replacement department. High floors are out and low floors are in, and I got a heads up about that from quite a few of you, and it was interesting to check out the new Southeast Queensland rail bus situation. More to come on that in future reviews. Not having to think about work meant that I also had a chance to think about the new year and develop some goals and aspirations. From a talking planning goal perspective, relaunching State of the Plan was pretty high up the list, as I want to be a bit more balanced on the planning versus transport front. Most of my inspiration for relaunching this came from a very different background, including the Trash Taste podcast and the Unicorn Circuit, which are a lot funnier in nature. And I really liked the segmented nature, particularly of the Unicorn Circuit and the shenanigans of Trash Taste, and I thought some of those ideas could be a good fit, but this relaunch is very experimental to say the least. So let's kick off the first regular segment, what I'd like to call the Planner's Pamphlet. The Planner's Pamphlet is a segment of learnings which may really help out a student or recent graduate on their planning journey, or is an opportunity to just point out something interesting in the profession. January 2023 is about getting back to work for most of us, and the month can either be exceptionally quiet or exceptionally busy, depending on how your clients, how other teams, and how other organisations you are working with are going. For those of you who've recently graduated, congratulations by the way, there is a pretty good chance you'll be prepping for your first full-time planning job, ready to start soon if you haven't already. If you have a graduate job lined up to start in the next few weeks, that's fantastic news and all the best with it. I want to quickly go through some of the basics that might help you out, especially if this is your first full-time work role. For those of you who may not know, I'm now in my third year of full-time planning work and have worked across the private and public sectors. Whilst at uni, I also undertook 2 planning internships and did a year part-time with an aviation consultancy. I've worked on a couple of autonomous vehicle trials, overseeing vehicle operations and monitoring systems. So I'd like to think I have a fairly reasonable understanding of what should be expected of a planning and transport industry professional. So, here are 5 brief things to keep in mind, especially if this is your first planning job or full-time development or transport industry role. First of all, keeping things professional, neat, and tidy. Number 2, communication, communication, communication. Number 3, challenge yourself, but know your limits. Number 4, flexible work is great, but use it wisely. And finally, build up that professional network, and make sure to stay in touch with your uni colleagues. Professionalism is a very important part of the planning profession, whether you're in the public or private sector. Your clients, proponents, and even the general public expect that your communication, behaviour, and presentation will be to a high standard. Professionalism is quite a general term, but think about your phone etiquette, the language that you use in emails and conversations, and the letters you write, as well as your overall behaviour. I like to think about it this way. Would I feel comfortable with this information being out in the public realm? And spoiler alert, if you are a planner, emails, letters, file notes, and other information that you might prepare may be able to be requested and published under Freedom of Information rules. In terms of staying neat and tidy, office etiquette could be new for some of you, but here are a few general pointers. Keep your desk and workspace free from clutter and mess. Wash up and put away cups, bowls, plates, and utensils after meals and coffee breaks. This sounds super simple, but trust me, people don't do this that well in an office environment, and it shows, and it's really frustrating. Using meeting rooms or quiet areas when you've got to take calls which may contain confidential or sensitive customer information. That should go without saying, but it's amazing what conversations can happen in the middle of an office, so just be mindful about who you're talking to, what you're saying, and where you have that conversation. And of course, if you're working in a public sector organisation or the private sector, the way that your appearance looks does matter too. Things are starting to change, but there are a few general rules of thumb just in case you're not sure. If you're in the public sector, a dress shirt and pants or a skirt and dress is generally going to be quite appropriate. If you're in the private sector, there's actually an easier way to often find this out. Although that's a pretty safe bet, what's often a good strategy is to look at the website of the company that you're joining and see how people are addressed in the About Us or Our Team section. That's always a good starting point. Some of these points should be really obvious, but it amazes me how often I see people, even quite far up the food chain, not demonstrating these behaviours. If you are in any doubt, it is always best to ask, and that brings me very neatly onto the next point. Communication is crucial to being an effective planner, and if you're new to the profession, it really is an important skill to build. Planners are expected to interpret technical information and convey it not just to other planners, but to people with limited technical knowledge, such as clients, proponents, or the general community, especially in a consultation environment. Verbal communication, either face-to-face, via video conference, or over the phone, is going to feature in your job perhaps more than you might expect. Clients, proponents, team members, and other stakeholders expect updates, and often an email is not the most appropriate way to deliver the information. Picking up the phone is usually the preferred way of providing progress updates or to explain more complex concepts to someone, and phone calls are a really important part of building rapport with a client or proponent. So, if you're not comfortable making phone calls, now is an excellent time to challenge yourself to get a little more comfortable with it. Speaking of challenging yourself, that is a really important part of professional development. And while you might have that lovely, expensive parchment framed in your office with your degree on it, your career learning has only just started. In your first few weeks of work, it's important to get comfortable with the office environment you're in, find out more about the team you work with, and meet the other teams that you're going to work more closely with to assist you. But after that point, it is well worth asking what projects other teams or people may need a hand with, spending some time looking for new training opportunities and learning areas, and it's worth having that conversation with your manager to discuss your progress. If this is your first industry job, it's highly likely that your role has a probation period. Taking initiative is a commodity that is looked upon very favourably by managers. Next up is something that may or may not apply depending on your employer, but is becoming an increasingly popular offering in the workplace: flexible working arrangements. I'm very grateful to have access to a hybrid work policy, which allows me to match my location to the tasks I'm doing. For example, key team meetings are usually face-to-face, interim catch-ups can be done virtually, and for a lot of project work that sometimes is easy to do from home or from varied office locations. Navigating flexible and hybrid working options as someone new to the industry or new to that employer can actually be pretty difficult. As a baseline, I would certainly recommend doing your onboarding, that is, getting started in a job face-to-face, as it provides that opportunity to be guided around the office and to meet the team you're working with and other teams that you'll work beside. When starting a new job, meeting people in person is really important, and it usually makes it easier to know who to reach out to if you've got any questions, especially further down the line when you are working off-site. Beyond that, it's also worth finding out what routines some of your colleagues have, and that might help you shape a hybrid work option that works best for you. There's certainly value in having focused time, which allows you to just get on with the job and have some time in your day to be a bit more social. This time allows you to learn the tips and tricks and to seek help on things that you're not so sure about yourself. Knowing how people work and what they value is really helpful, and especially if you're relying on their input in a project, makes a lot of sense. Lastly, let's talk about your professional network. And even if you weren't a networking whiz at uni, you already have the basis of a solid professional network. As a uni graduate, you've just spent a few years with people who've had similar training, but might have different interests across the same field. Pro tip, do not lose that network. Some of your classmates might become development assessment specialists, others will become great strategic planners, some might see environmental planning as their calling, a few might become transport planners, some may chart a super specialised pathway, and others might decide that planning isn't their best fit. Still, keeping in touch with that cohort is a good idea for a few reasons. You may never know who will be your next co-worker, and further down the line, you may need to reach out for some specialist information, and they might be the perfect person to pick up the phone and call. And of course, there are lots of opportunities to make new connections through your new job. Most professional industry bodies have young planners and young professionals networks, and large employers often have their own internal graduate networks or young professional networks. So, take the effort to join in, and who knows, you may even lead one of these groups one day. With the planner's pamphlet thoroughly read, it's time to give me a sign. Give me a sign is a short segment for funny, interesting, or unusual signage that makes us ask further questions. Development assessment planners will often find themselves assessing building identification signage and advertising, and of course, signs help us navigate and interpret the urban environment. This week's Give Me a Sign contender is a heartwarming one. I wanted to start off on a good note, especially for someone keen to talk about and spruik active transport as a great way to travel for short journeys. At Stones Corner on my trip up to Brizzy, I spotted this Give Way to Pedestrians sign, and it's a lovely change from the Give Way to Vehicles signs, which I often spot on the edge of footpaths in many country towns. I hope to see more signs like this across our towns and cities, as they are a small but important reminder and help us reframe how we use and perceive road space. They're definitely better than the alternative, which is such a common sight across many regional towns and car parks. So let's go and catch some PT. A play on the famous Ben Lee song, Catch Some PT, is a short segment designed to discuss those transport spottos that aren't ready for a full review, but warrant the extra conversation. This week's example is from a brief stopover in Byron Bay, which I took on my way heading back to Orange. I went on a bit of a walk around town and checked out the new transport interchange that opened in 2021. It's adjacent to the old rail corridor and incorporates some of the heritage elements from the old station rather nicely. The new shelter uses similar timber colours and metal finishes that pull from the colour palette of the old tracks, the planter boxes, and the station buildings. The mural along the edge of the bus station is also a nice touch. I also spotted a few buses during my time and decided to test out how well my new phone camera could do. Judging by this shot, I'm very happy with my new Pixel 7 Pro. And around the corner from the new interchange on Somerset Street, I also spotted some classic double-deckers, which can be chartered. Sounds tempting for a big milestone subscriber special. Maybe I'm getting a little too big for my boots on that one though. Anyway, I hope you have enjoyed joining me today for the relaunch of State of the Plan. I hope to do this sort of thing a little more regularly and on an easier to commit to schedule. So let's call it monthly then. And for the recurring segments, if you have some topics or ideas that you think are worthy of the planner's pamphlet, some interesting or funny signage for Give Me a Sign, and of course an entrant for the Catch Some PT segment, you can pass those on via the social platforms or via email at talkingplanning.videos@gmail.com. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you again soon.